Caterina Devon is impersonating somebody on this island. This has been the latest and popular theory and speculation that's been going on within the One Piece community for the last week or two. Who is she impersonating? How did she get onto the island? And why is she even here at Egghead in the first place? In this video, I will be giving my own personal thoughts and speculations on this whole situation. For context, in Chapter 1079, as the citizens and researchers of Egghead are evacuating the island before the Navy shows up, we see off the coast of the island a pirate ship with the Jolly Roger of the Blackbeard Pirates. At first this would seem odd, because just a few chapters beforehand, in Chapter 1063, was the beginning of Law vs. Blackbeard. The ones who were involved in that fight was Doc Q, Stronger, Van Augur, Jesus Burgess, and Blackbeard himself. Later in Chapter 1080, we also see some of the crew on the pirate island Hachinosu, including Avalo Pizarro, Shiryu, San Juan Wolf, Vasco Shot, and Kuzan. That leaves two Blackbeard pirates unaccounted for, Lafitte and Caterina Devon. And so it is highly likely that these two are the ones who are on the ship approaching Egghead Island. Though we don't know about Lafitte's devil fruit abilities just yet, he is able to turn his arms into bird wings, and he's a master of stealth and infiltration. On the other hand, Caterina Devon has the Inu Inu no Mi, Maro Kyubi no Kitsune. With this, she is able to turn into a nine-tailed fox and can transform and impersonate other people. We currently do not know the exact requirements of impersonation. Does she have to touch the person in order to be able to copy them? Similar to like Bon Clay's devil fruit abilities? Does she have to kill the person in order to transform into them? This could be important to figuring out who she is impersonating on the island, but we don't know enough information. Thus, we can only speculate. So for a while, the manga cut away from Egghead Island and were showing events that were going down between Garp saving Kobe on Hachinosu Island, as well as revealing the truth of what happened at the Reverie, including Sabo, King Cobra, Vivi, etc. When we cut back to Egghead Island, the mysteries that were going on involving the Straw Hats fighting various Seraphim, Bonnie was learning about Kuma's backstory, Vegapunk was held prisoner by York, etc. Everything had been solved, and everyone is now in the control room of the Labostratum. For the most part, everyone looks a little roughed up, but mostly okay. Robin and Kaku are the ones who are the worst off, seeming to have taken a significant amount of damage. Bonnie also seems to be in more high spirits than from when we last saw her in tears over seeing some of her father's memories. The crew has recognized that York was the traitor, captured her, and have her laying on the ground. So here's where the next mystery begins. Are Lafitte and Caterina Devon in the Labostratum with everybody? They obviously must have made it into the island in general, but the defense system of the Labostratum has been activated. No one can get in, and no one can get out. The crew is protected, but at the same time cornered. The Frontier Dome was turned off briefly before York's reveal as the traitor, which allowed CP0 to get inside. And even though we saw the Blackbeard ship way after that had happened, it is possible that Lafitte and Devon were able to sneak in too, whether they entered during the brief period that the system was deactivated, or somehow Lafitte was able to infiltrate on his own and able to bring Devon along with him. It is possible that they have not infiltrated the Labostratum, which we will talk about a little bit later, but for the current moment, let's just say that they have made it inside. But actually, before we speculate about the impersonation situation, I want to ask another question. Why are Lafitte and Devon here at Egghead Island to begin with? Do they have business with Vegapunk? Or maybe with the Straw Hats? While either of these are unlikely, I have an idea of their main mission, and that is to obtain S-Snake. Back in Chapter 1059, we got to see a flashback of not only the Navy infiltrating Amazon Lily to detain Boa Hancock, but Blackbeard had also shown up looking to take Hancock's power for himself. He even hinted at this back in Chapter 956, which was left to be ambiguous at the time. But Chapter 1059 was also the introduction to the new pacifistas that the government had created, the Seraphim. Blackbeard had encountered S-Hawk, and we were also introduced to S-Snake during this invasion as well. I don't believe that Blackbeard encountered S-Snake while he was here, but after clashing and dealing with S-Hawk, I think he had a pretty good idea of what was going on, and that these kids resembled the warlords of the sea. Blackbeard was unsuccessful in obtaining Boa Hancock due to a combination of Hancock blackmailing him with his crew turned to stone, Rayleigh showing up to scare him away, and Kobe sacrificing himself in order to save the Navy soldiers who were turned to stone. And since Blackbeard was unable to obtain Hancock's devil fruit for himself, I think he has since set his sights on S-Snake as a substitution, since she also is able to utilize her powers. Now that we've established the reason why Devon is at Egghead, this is where the bulk of the speculation is happening. Who is Caterina Devon impersonating? There seems to be a handful of suspects that the general community has pointed towards. First up is Jewelry Bonnie. The main thing that makes Bonnie suspicious is during the scene where she is running towards the Thousand Sunny alongside Luffy, Frankie, and Lilith. Bonnie suggested to bring more food along, but when Luffy says that Sanji can make plenty of pizza on the ship, she compliments how Sanji is both a good cook and a good fighter. Luffy finds it odd that she is suddenly cheerful, considering that she was upset from the night before. She says she decided she won't kill Vegapunk, but also denies that she wasn't crying. It could be Bonnie just trying to act cool in front of Luffy, but some people are taking this as Caterina Devon trying to fit in, and denying the crying due to not having any knowledge about what Bonnie was currently experiencing. And if you think about when Bonnie was experiencing Kuma's memories, she was all alone at that point, so the argument is that Devon could have easily snuck up to Bonnie and did whatever she had to do in order to impersonate her. You could also argue that Luffy's observation haki allowed him to sense something wrong or fishy with Bonnie. Overall, I would say that Bonnie could be a likely candidate. The next suspect is Robin. The reasoning here is during the scene where Luffy was communicating with the Gorosei. He was about to give him information on their current situation, but Robin speaks up and tells Luffy not to give away information to the enemy. Some people say that Robin's tone with Luffy seemed out of character, that she normally wouldn't backtalk Luffy like that. I feel like if Luffy was able to sense something off with Bonnie, he would have also sensed something was wrong with Robin. Luffy's judgment of character is usually spot on, and here he seems to be speaking to Robin very casually with no concern. Also, since Robin is severely injured, if she was Caterina Devon, she could easily play the victim role of needing to rest and stay off to the side and being able to listen to everyone without needing to interact with them too much. We have an entire night of events that Oda has not yet shown us, so it is hard to say how things played out. Last we saw of Robin though, she was with Chopper and Atlas heading into the basement floor in search for Vegapunk. We can likely assume that they found York and that Robin engaged in combat with her. It's difficult for me to believe that York would be able to do so much damage to Robin to put her in the state that she's in. Back in chapter 1079, York wanted to execute her plan in secret because she didn't believe she would be able to hold a fight against anyone. It's possible a Seraphim may have come to York's aid, but in the end, York did get captured. So between an entire fight and being accompanied by at least Chopper and Atlas, it seems next to impossible for Caterina Devon to get close enough to Robin to be able to impersonate her. In conclusion, I don't believe that Robin is a suspect at all. A similar scenario to Robin is our next suspect, Kaku. He is basically in the same position where, since he was injured in a battle, he could lurk to the side and listen in on conversations without having to interact much. It seems like he was also involved in a rough battle, even stating that he fought 2 Seraphim at once. It's almost implying as if that fight was a 2v1. Last time we saw Kaku, he was chasing after Zoro, who was chasing after S-Hawk, who decided to run off and fight weaker opponents to try to get into the heads of Luffy and Zoro. With Luffy and Lucci fighting S-Bear, the second Seraphim that Kaku fought has to either been S-Shark or S-Snake. We know that S-Shark was right below them on the 3rd floor in combat with Sanji, so the most likely candidate for the second Seraphim would be S-Shark. But I don't think Kaku would have been in a position to fight S-Hawk and S-Shark in a 2v1 with Sanji and Nami there, with potentially Jinbei and Stussy nearby. It's also possible that he ran into S-Snake, since she had already dealt with Frankie, Usopp, and Lilith. The problem here is that it doesn't seem like either Kaku or Robin have any signs of petrification from their injuries. One other curious thing is that when Rob Lucci was whispering to himself, sending a status report to Kizaru and Saturn, Kaku actually questioned what Rob Lucci was up to. Both of them are top CP0 agents that have a higher status due to being the new masked agents, so you would think that Kaku would already know what Lucci was up to without needing to question it. But anyways, I think with Kaku being engaged in combat, I think it's a similar situation as Robin, where it's hard to say if Caterina Devon had the opportunity to interact with Kaku. Again, we don't know if Devon needs to touch a person or kill someone or need to interact with them at all in order to impersonate a person. Killing option aside though, and focusing on the touch aspect, even if Devon could get an interaction or touch, she would still need to at least put them out of commission, knocked out and put off to the side in a closet or something, so that as she's impersonating Kaku, the real Kaku doesn't just like walk in, you know? Overall, I'll put Kaku in second for now. I don't think it's him, but I would say he's a more likely suspect than Robin. Another suspect people have pointed towards was Stussy. Personally, I think Stussy has the least amount of evidence out of anyone positioned here in the control room. One could say that maybe she's playing both sides, originally being a CP0 agent, but turning on them to reveal she aligns with Vegapunk, but then turning on Vegapunk to reveal she's actually with CP0. I don't think that's the case though. That aside, the only type of evidence we may have in this chapter is the way that Rob Lucci is viciously staring at her. One could argue that Lucci's animal instinct could be kicking in and can sense that something seems off with Stussy, but in in reality, I think Lucci is still just salty over the fact that Stussy betrayed him. In terms of the missing events overnight, last we saw her was walking with Sanji and Jinbei, before Sanji ran off to rescue Nami. Both Stussy and Jinbei look fine in terms of bruises, so it doesn't seem like they really engaged in combat. And I don't believe Jinbei is someone who can be easily fooled, either by Stussy or by Devon. I would put Stussy above Kaku in this list, but still a ways away from the number 1 suspect spot. Which, now looking at this list, these are the main 4 suspects that are within the labostratum and the order in which I think they are likely. Bonnie is easily at the top, but I actually don't believe that she is the suspect either. From my perspective, I believe Bonnie is acting differently because she learned of the truth about her father and may have found some closure with it. She was originally out to kill Vegapunk, but has now changed her mind and has no ill intentions towards him. So out of the 4 suspects, my conclusion is that none of them will turn out to be Caterina Devon. How can this be? Did I just waste your time going through all of this? No, I promise that I do believe there is still a suspect. There are actually 2 more options that I would like to propose here that actually don't involve anyone that's within the labostratum, but rather below the stratum. The first one I will mention is one I did see some people talk about that I'm actually a fan of. The suspect would be one of the 9 vice admirals of the Navy. If we assume that Lafitte and Devon have not infiltrated the stratum, they could have infiltrated one of the Navy ships instead and have taken out one of the vice admirals. And out of the 9 of them, I don't believe that it could be these 5 specifically. Doberman is a recurring character throughout the series and has gotten the most panel time in the Egghead arc. He's been interacting a lot with Saturn, and although it would be crazy if Devon was able to get that close to Saturn and Kizaru without them noticing, I think Doberman has shown enough shock and emotion to Saturn's comments about priorities and human life that I highly doubt Devon would be able to pull off. Also, the reason why I don't think it's any of these 4 Vice Admirals is because we saw them all in Chapter 1078 during a flashback that happened 3 months ago. I think it's odd that as this part of the chapter talks about the Navy sending reinforcements to Egghead, that they didn't show all the Vice Admirals that would be going to Egghead. I could be overthinking it here, but I almost view this as a bit of foreshadowing that these 4 could not be Devon, as in these Vice Admirals are the ones that are accounted for. This leads me to believe that it could be one of these 4 Vice Admirals. Oddly enough, out of these 4, 3 of them are shown preparing for action at the end of Chapter 1090, and also including the multi-chinned one. So one might believe that this specific Vice Admiral that wasn't shown is the odd one out, and that maybe he could be the suspect. I won't completely count him out, but I actually think Oda would be sneaky enough to throw Devon into one of these panels if she truly is impersonating a Vice Admiral. My picks would be one of these 2, simply because they just look the creepiest to me. I think this old lady gives me the creeps the most, so I'm gonna place my vote on her. But before locking this in, there's still one more candidate that I would like to talk about that I think could end up being the most likely suspect out of all of them. That suspect is Caribou. This swamp creep is still here on this island somewhere. The last we saw of him was in Chapter 1065, where Zoro kicked him off the ship. He has not appeared since then. It's been a long-running theory that when Caribou mentioned letting a certain someone know about Pluton being in Wano, that he could be referring to Blackbeard. Whether Caribou is the eluded 10th Titanic captain or not, Caribou could be working for the Blackbeard pirates and had called them to catch them up on the situation happening at Egghead, which would then prompt their ship to now appear near the coast of the island. Now hear me out. I actually see 2 ways of how this could unfold. Even though Zoro kicked him off the ship, you could say Caribou has his foot in the door with the Straw Hats. In the midst of the chaos, he could come running to Luffy asking to hop on the ship one more time to be taken off the island and dropped off somewhere else. Luffy might be likely to let him on board. So if this ends up being the case, either Caterina Devon is impersonating Caribou and is able to get close to Luffy and the crew, or Caribou is able to hide both Lafitte and Devon in his swamp and bring them aboard. I do have one problem with this though. Towards the beginning of this video, I talked about how the goal of Devon and Lafitte might be to obtain S-Snake for themselves. If Vegapunk is able to take the Seraphim along with them, and having York's control over them break, then I think this could play out in this way, attempting to infiltrate the Straw Hat ship to get their hands on S-Snake. If we do not take the Seraphim along with us, then it's possible that Caribou does not go towards the crew at all, and that Caterina Devon's impersonation has nothing to do with the Vegapunks or the Straw Hats. If they are there solely for S-Snake, then Devon could easily impersonate anybody just to get close to her. Actually, it would be wild if she was able to impersonate one of the Vegapunks, whether it be York or Stella, and see if she's able to command the Seraphim herself. But that's if she would even know about the chain of command. Plus, being on Egghead Island while a Navy invasion is happening might be a troubling situation for the Blackbeard crew. It really just depends on how this all plays out. In my final conclusion, I think the most likely suspects for Caterina Devon to be involved with would either be with Caribou or with one of the Vice Admirals. Who do you think is the imposter? Comment down below and let me know. I'd love to hear any agreements or counter-arguments to any of this. A lot of these ideas have been floating around all over the community, and I hope you enjoyed my take on the situation. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to catch more of my videos. Thanks for watching. My name is JonRossy, and I'll leave you with the dawn.